In February 2021, a man got on a video call with Goldman Sachs and pretended to be someone else, a real specific executive at YouTube. He used an app to disguise his voice, and while he talked, his boss texted him what to say. The point of the performance was simple: convince one of the most powerful banks on earth that a company was huge, so the bank would hand it $40 million. You probably think you know how startup fraud works. A founder rounds up 10,000 users becomes 100,000. Good month becomes great year. Everybody fudges the numbers and the bad ones get caught. Forget that. The companies in this video were not exaggerations. They were hollow all the way down. The customers did not exist. The product did not exist. In one case, almost $2 billion did not exist. And the smartest people in finance, the banks, the auditors, the venture funds, handed over fortunes anyway. We are talking about the biggest bank in America, famous statesmen, a blue chip stock index, all of them fooled by companies that were, at their core, empty. So here is the question we are going to chase. How do you raise hundreds of millions of dollars for a company that is not real? And every single time, what is the one small detail, the thing anyone could have checked, that finally brings it down? We are going to count up. It starts with fake customers. It ends with a vanished spy. I am Sam. Follow the money. Start with Charlie Javis. In 2017, she founded a startup called Frank. The pitch was good. Applying for college financial aid is a nightmare, and Frank promised to make it simple. One form, less pain. She landed on a Forbes 30 under 30 list. She looked like the future. In 2021, JP Morgan Chase, the biggest bank in America, agreed to buy Frank for $175 million. The reason was the users. Javis told JP Morgan that Frank had more than 4 million customers. To a bank, 4 million young people just starting their financial lives is gold. That is 4 million future checking accounts, credit cards, and loans. JP Morgan was so eager to win Frank before a rival could that it moved fast, and fast is exactly how you skip the boring questions. There was one problem with the 4 million. It was not 4 million. The real number was under 300,000. So when JP Morgan asked to verify the user list during the deal, Javis did not have one to show. According to prosecutors, she went and built one. She hired a data science professor and paid him about $18,000 to generate millions of fake customer records out of thin air. Names, emails, the works. Synthetic people invented to order to close a $175 million sale. Here is the part that should keep every executive up at night. JP Morgan bought the company, they wired the money, and then they found out. In January of 2022, months after the deal closed, JP Morgan's marketing team did the most basic thing imaginable. They took a batch of 400,000 of these supposed Frank customers and they sent them an email. A normal marketing campaign. The results came back. Of the 400,000 emails, only 28% even reached an inbox. A real list lands almost every time, and of the ones that arrived, just over 1% were opened. The list was not underperforming, it was fake. The people were not real, so the emails had nowhere to go. One marketing test. That is the detail that exposed the whole thing. In March of 2025, a jury found Charlie Javis guilty of conspiracy, bank fraud, and wire fraud. She was sentenced to 85 months in prison, just over 7 years, and ordered to pay back hundreds of millions. JP Morgan shut Frank down entirely and sued her. The same founder Forbes had celebrated was now the cautionary tale. The most sophisticated bank in the country never checked whether 4 million customers were real until after it paid for them. Faking your customers is bold, but the next founder did not fake a spreadsheet. He faked a human being. This is Ozy Media. Founded by Carlos Watson, a Harvard and Stanford guy, a polished speaker, a man who could fill a room. Ozy was supposed to be a media empire for the new generation. Newsletters, a festival, video series, a TV show. The story Ozy told the world was reach. Massive audiences. Tens of millions of people. The audience was mostly invented. Ozy told advertisers and investors about tens of millions of viewers, when the real engagement was a small fraction of that, propped up by buying traffic and quietly inflating the dashboards everyone was shown. They had raised more than $83 million from serious people on the strength of that story. By early 2021, they wanted more. Goldman Sachs was considering an investment of around $40 million, but Goldman wanted proof. They wanted to hear from Ozy's partners, the platforms that supposedly loved Ozy's content, to confirm the numbers were real. So Ozy set up a call. On the line would be a senior executive from YouTube, there to vouch for how well Ozy's videos were doing. Goldman got on the call. The YouTube executive came on and delivered glowing review. Ozy was a star. It was exactly what the bank needed to hear. The YouTube executive on that call was not a YouTube executive. It was Samir Rao, Ozy's own co-founder and chief operating officer, using a voice-altering app to impersonate a real YouTube manager named Alex Piper. While Rao performed, Carlos Watson texted him talking points. Stay in character, sell it. And it nearly worked, except something about the call felt off. To the people at Goldman, the voice, the connection. So they did the one thing the con could not survive. They hung up and they reached out to the real Alex Piper directly through YouTube. The real executive had never heard of the call. He had never spoken to them. The whole thing was a performance. Goldman pulled out. That September, the New York Times told the world, and Ozy Media collapsed in a matter of days. And yet, within a week, Carlos Watson was already trying to announce a relaunch, as if the world had not just watched the whole thing burn. He was convicted in 2024 of securities fraud, wire fraud, and aggravated identity theft for stealing a real person's identity to close a deal, and sentenced to nearly 10 years. If you want frauds like this taken apart down to the exact detail that cracked them, that is the entire job of this channel. Subscribe and follow the trail. Because faking a person on a phone call is one thing. The next man faked an entire truck. Trevor Milton wanted to be the next Elon Musk. His company was Nikola, named after the same inventor as Tesla, and the promise was enormous. Hydrogen-powered semi-trucks that would haul freight across the country with zero emissions. A clean transport revolution, and Milton at the center of it. The centerpiece was a truck called the Nikola 1. Milton unveiled it at a glossy event, a real, gleaming, finished semi. He talked about it like it was ready. He released a polished video of the Nikola 1 cruising down a highway, powerful and silent, doing exactly what a working truck should do. Investors believed. In June of 2020, Nikola went public by merging with a shell company, a SPAC that had raised more than $700 million. Within days, Nikola was worth almost $30 billion. For a brief, dizzying moment, a company that had never sold a single truck was worth more than Ford. Trevor Milton, on paper, was a billionaire. There was a small problem with the truck in that beautiful video. It did not work. The Nikola 1 had no functioning powertrain. It could not drive. It could not do anything under its own power. So to make the video, they did not drive it. They took the truck to the top of a long, gentle hill and they let it roll. The camera filmed it coasting downhill, gravity doing all the work, and the footage was framed to look like the truck was powering itself along a flat road. The Revolution was a prop rolling down a slope. This came out in September of 2020 when a short-selling firm called Hindenburg Research published a report calling Nikola an intricate fraud built on dozens of lies and described the rolling truck. The timing could not have been worse for Milton. Just before the report, General Motors had agreed to a partnership worth around $2 billion, including a stake in Nikola. Once the truth came out, that deal fell apart and the stock collapsed. Milton was charged, and in 2022, a jury convicted him of fraud. Investors had lost hundreds of millions of dollars. A fake truck cost people money. But the next fraud was not about money you could lose. It was about results you could not trust while you were sick. Elizabeth Holmes dropped out of Stanford at 19 to change medicine. Her company, Theranos, claimed that it had invented a machine that could run hundreds of blood tests from a single finger prick. One drop of blood, a tiny device they called the Edison, and a full picture of your health. No needles, no vials. It was a beautiful idea, and the money agreed. Theranos raised more than $700 million. At its peak, it was valued at around $9 billion. Holmes was on every magazine cover, the youngest self-made female billionaire in the world, and her board of directors was a wall of legendary names. 2 former secretaries of state, including Henry Kissinger and George Shultz, a future Secretary of Defense, generals, and senators. Not one of them was a doctor or an engineer who could judge whether the machine actually worked. The names themselves became the proof, and nobody checked behind them. Because the Edison did not work. It could only perform a small handful of the tests Theranos advertised, and even those were unreliable, so Theranos hid it. For the vast majority of tests, they secretly used ordinary commercial blood analyzers made by other companies, sometimes diluting the tiny finger prick samples to force them to fit. The miracle technology was a front for other people's equipment. The detail that brought Theranos down was not a number. It was the people who refused to stay quiet. Young employees inside the company, like Tyler Schultz and Erica Chung, saw that the tests did not work and that patients were getting bad results. They went to a Wall Street Journal reporter, John Carreyrou, even as Theranos threatened them with lawyers. And the results were not abstract. The journal documented a trail of patients given wrong answers about their own bodies. One woman was told she was HIV positive. She was not. Another woman, who had already suffered miscarriages, was told during a new pregnancy that she was losing the baby again. The test was wrong. She gave birth to a healthy child. Theranos eventually voided 2 full years of test results because they could not be trusted, and in Arizona alone, it later agreed to refund millions of dollars to patients it had sold tests it could not reliably run. In 2022, Elizabeth Holmes was convicted of defrauding investors and sentenced to more than 11 years in prison. The company that promised to catch disease early had spent years handing people fiction about their own health. Fake tech is dangerous. But the biggest hole of all was not the customers or the product or the technology. It was the money itself. Almost $2 billion of it. Wirecard was Germany's pride. A payments company, the kind that quietly moves money behind the scenes when you tap a card. It rode the fintech boom into the DAX, the index of Germany's 30 most important companies, sitting beside car makers and banks that had existed for a century. At its peak, Wirecard was worth more than 24 billion euros. It was worth more than Deutsche Bank, the biggest bank in the country. The engine of all that growth was Wirecard's business in Asia, run through partners, and the cash it generated. By 2019, the company said that roughly 1.9 billion euros of its profits were sitting safely in trust in 2 bank accounts in the Philippines. That money was the proof that the whole operation was real. As long as the 1.9 billion was there, Wirecard was a titan. For 5 years, a reporter at the Financial Times named Dan McCrum had been writing that the numbers did not add up, that Wirecard's booming Asian profits looked invented and its cash might not be real. Wirecard called him a liar and a market manipulator. And for a long time, the world believed the company, not the reporter. In June of 2020, Wirecard's auditor, EY, finally did the simple thing. They asked the 2 Philippine banks to confirm the 1.9 billion euros. The banks wrote back. The accounts did not exist. The documents Wirecard had used to prove the money were forgeries. There was no 1.9 billion euros. There never had been. EY refused to sign the books, and within days, Wirecard, a member of Germany's most elite stock index, collapsed into insolvency. The first DAX company ever to simply implode. The money that backed the entire empire had been imaginary the whole time. One letter from a bank. That is the detail. Not a clever audit, not a forensic accountant. A one-sentence answer to a question nobody had bothered to actually ask for years. Investigators would later conclude that the Asian business generating all those profits was, to a large degree, a fiction. The customers, the transactions, the partners, layers of paper built to look like a thriving empire. But the story does not end with a bankruptcy, because 2 people connected to Wirecard ended up somewhere nobody expected. One was a reporter, the other was a spy. Start with the reporter. Dan McCrum had been right for years. And for being right, he was punished. Wirecard hired private investigators to follow him. He was smeared as a manipulator. And most disturbing of all, Germany's own financial regulator, BaFin, the agency that was supposed to catch Wirecard, instead went after him. BaFin banned investors from betting against Wirecard, the first time it had ever shielded a single company that way, and it filed a criminal complaint against the journalists investigating the fraud. The watchdog protected the fraud and hunted the man exposing it. Then there is the chief operating officer, Jan Marsalek, the man who ran the part of Wirecard where the fake money supposedly lived. The moment the company collapsed, he vanished. He did not just slip away. He chartered a private jet, flew to Belarus, and made his way to Moscow, all within days, like a man who had an exit planned long in advance. Later reporting revealed why. Marsalek had not just been a fraudster. He had been working for Russian military intelligence, the GRU, for years. In 2025, a court in London convicted a ring of Bulgarian spies that prosecutors said Marsalek had been directing from Moscow. The man at the center of Europe's biggest accounting fraud was also a Russian intelligence asset, and he is still out there. Different schemes, same shape, a beautiful story, a hollow center, and the one detail that gave it away. Next time, a woman who raised billions for a coin that never existed, then vanished off the face of the earth. I'm Sam. Follow the money.